Hello everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Indie Diarist podcast, a show on the human stories behind indie game development. This is your loyal Indie Diarist and host, Anthony L. Wolf, and this is episode 61, the first one of 2025. Welcome to a new season of the show in brief. I've got so many plans in mind for 2025, so many guests that I want to invite, some VIP guests too, so hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll be able to bring them onto the show. This episode is the first one of 2025, of course, and it's with Inkblack Interactive. They're an amazing couple who are working on a little delightful mobile game called Art Styles. I tried it firsthand and I do recommend it. Check out the links in the description if you want to try it too. Before we get into the episode, of course, I want to shout out to my amazing patrons who are Zucchini, Fishbone Dev, and Peleg. You guys are starting another year with me as my Patreons. You've been supporting me since I launched the Patreon in 2023. You haven't skipped a month. You are incredible. Love you so much, and thank you for supporting the show this way. If you two listeners want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/theindie-diarist or check out the links in the description of the episode so that you too can support the show. But now let's get into Indie Diary number 61. All right, hello everybody, and welcome to Indie Diary number 60, which is the last. No, wait, this should be 61. The first episode of 2025. So, yeah, I'm here with Alex and Emilee from Inkblack Interactive. The guys got in touch through Threads when I put out a little call for new guests for the rest of the year and also for the beginning of the new year. And they're a couple, they're working on, they're husband and wife, two-person indie studio, but I'll let them introduce themselves. So please, Alex and Emilee, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, what you do, where you're based, and what you're working on right now.
For sure. So, hi, I'm Alex Johnstone. We're based out of Colorado Springs in Colorado, USA. And we are, like you said, a husband and wife game development duo. We met quite a few years ago in school, and we've, for the last 3 or 4 years, been pursuing our indie dream, which is releasing our first game and hopefully subsequent games.
Mm-hmm. Fingers crossed. And my name is Emilee Johnstone, Alex's wife. And like he said, we met at school, and have been trying to make indie games for a minute. And with Art Styles, our most recent release, we're kind of like stepping out and kind of making the leap into really trying to run our own like successful indie studio, not just like taking it from a hobby to a career.
I've just noticed one thing, which is always funny. If there's a play on word or like a pun in the title of a game, I don't usually notice it until the developers say it. And of course, now you have Art Styles, which is a pun on art styles, but it's written differently, as the audience, as the listeners will see from the description of the episode. But yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about that game because I'm a big art, not a big art nerd, but I do like art, and also I do like those puzzle games in which you just move things around and play around with art and pictures. So we'll get to that. But first, I'd like to start with these episodes with a little icebreaker. And in your case, I thought I'd do something a little different. But let's do with the standard version first. If you could be any game's character for one day, who would you be and why?
I thought about this over breakfast, and I'm pretty confident in my answer. Mm-hmm. And you can tell me if this is not allowed, because it is, be a person in a video game for a day is a little loose. But I would choose to be my Animal Crossing character.
That's fine, yeah.
Basically from any game in the genre, so that I could spend a day doing the things I already love to do, like collect rocks and seashells and bugs. Okay. And talk to all my friends and neighbors, but just get paid to do it. Yeah.
And also have a backpack that can host like a bedside stand or something like that. Yeah.
And I feel like Tom Nook makes a better overlord than anybody else. He's really only asking for weeds and seashells. So it sounds kind of like a vacation to me. You step into any other video game world for the day, and it's scary or a chore.
It's grim, yeah.
It's grim. So I'm trying to go for as cozy as possible, and I've spent a lot of time in that series from like the very first game all the way up through every title. So it feels very familiar. It would be like going to a vacation home.
Okay, perfect. Yeah,
So
I like that, and I think it is allowed. I suppose it's you want to be a character in that world, and specifically the protagonist of every Animal Crossing series. I think that counts. Yeah, when you said cozy, I thought Stardew Valley, but then I thought about the mines. I'm not sure I would like to do that.
No,
every day.
that's not cozy enough.
Absolutely
That's
not.
chores.
No.
Yeah,
That's
there's an
chores.
agenda there of chores.
Yeah,
I want.
absolutely. Yeah. And Alex, what about you?
I also gave this a little bit of thought, and I went for the grim and dark option. I'd do Geralt of Rivia's, in Witcher 3,
but that's a good one, yeah.
I just feel like that world is like so fleshed out and rich that exploring it for a day, riding around Velen and Novigrad and just immersing yourself in it. It feels like a good time, and then you get to leave, after the day is done. So. Yeah. Best of both worlds.
That's true. Okay, yeah. And also you would have all the Witcher powers for a day and basically be invulnerable and super agile, and then you'd be back in your human body.
I don't know, it might be inspirational.
Exactly. Yeah, why not? Hit the gym. But as I mentioned, I would like to do something different with you guys because of the theme of your game, and I think it's pretty unique. I mean, there are a lot of games that explore art out there, but not as many as people might think. So given your game's theme, do you think you would pick an artist or a historical figure from art history instead to be for a day?
That's a good question. I didn't know a ton about art history prior, like probably as much as your average, like, a Bachelor of Arts major knows about art history prior to the development of art styles. Learning enough about artists, I would say that like they have a very challenging role to play in society, and I'm not sure I would actually want to be one for a day. And in reality, being a game developer is as close to probably like being an artist in the Renaissance as not as you could get, but there is a comparison you could draw there. And it's a lot of work for not a lot of pay, and maybe nobody likes your stuff until you're done working on it. I don't know.
It's really fair. As a writer, I can relate. What about you, Alex?
I really love, we've been able to incorporate a lot of art from different cultures in the game. And, Asian art is always, Asian culture and art has always been an interest of mine. And so living in, 18th or 19th century Japan, doing sort of ukiyo-e style printmaking, I think that would be a really fun and interesting experience for a day. So I'd probably go there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I love both of your answers. One is realistic. One is a bit more romantic. I like that. Yeah. Great. Well then, guys, I think we can get into the meat of the episode, so to speak. And I always like to start from the beginning with these episodes. And the question I always ask is, what is your earliest or fondest memory that has to do with video games? The first thing you can remember.
I can go first because I'm older.
Fair.
I grew up kind of on the cusp of computers entering the home, and the first computer we got was an Apple Macintosh, which didn't have a lot of games. I've listened to previous podcasts of yours, and people in my situation are like, yeah, I grew up with a Mac. I didn't really game that much. Exactly, So the standout was Myst, and that really informed a lot of my personal interests and ultimately sort of the journey I've charted with games as well. I love both the aesthetic of that game. I think it was mind-blowing at the time. You go back and look at it now, or the remasters, and still hasn't been beaten in terms of the visual design and quality of it. It's fantastic. And then the sort of puzzle solving I just got a kick out of. I was always into the Mensa puzzles as a kid, and that to me felt like this merging of these tough intellectual sort of puzzle challenges with this immersive world, and so that game had a real outsized impact on kind of my love of games, and also style and aesthetics and everything else. So.
What about you, Emily?
I think for me, it would have been the first time I played the Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. I grew up in a pretty conservative, strict household, and video games were not really viewed in the most positive of light, and they were heavily restricted, and so I couldn't really play a ton of video games. But Nintendo was always like a safe company that my parents would allow me to play the titles from. And when I first played Ocarina of Time, I was still like quite young when it came out. I was quite young when it came out. So when I played it, it had already been out for a while, and there were guides online for me to figure out how to get through the water temple. But when I would solve some of those puzzles inside those temples, I felt like a child genius.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, I'm brilliant. And to play as like this swordsman who saves the day gave me like, as a kid who maybe didn't have a ton of confidence growing up, gave me this sense of like adventure and of confidence, self-confidence in myself, and really like gave me this world that I love to escape into over and over again. I'm a big fan.
Oh, the Traverse, yeah.
Yeah, it's really been like probably the game that has shaped me most as a person, or the series, as I feel really aligned to the hero's journey that you experience within it. And I find myself like time and time again thinking back to those games when going through difficult times. And sometimes I'll even like play them again, like replay Ocarina of Time when going through something difficult, as a way to like remember my strength, or that there's like a journey that I'm on, and this is all part of it. So.
Well, yeah, the listeners won't be able to see it unless they're watching the video version, which is just for my Patreons. But Emily has a lovely little Triforce tattoo on her forearm. That's cute little one there. Yeah, no, Ocarina of Time, I remember. I don't think I've ever finished it. I played it on the 3DS for a good portion of it. But then the screen was a bit small. So yeah, I'll probably try again. But it was so beautiful, and I played it for the first time about 6 years ago or something when I moved to the UK for the first time. And yeah, I mean, it was just magical, even as an adult. So I can imagine as a child. I also like what they did with the new Legend of Zelda, like the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and some of the dungeons there, like all the different shrines. They're just amazing. Like some of them have some really complex logic and even like gravity and physics games, little plays and mini games and whatnot, and I think I always feel very clever when I solve those. So yeah, that's I think they retain that kind of feeling. That's great. And yeah, well, I think you kind of answered this question already, but do you think those early games influenced the kind of projects that you like to work on now? Not necessarily art styles, but maybe some games that you may have thought about for the future as well.
Yeah, it definitely has. As someone who like grew up playing almost exclusively Nintendo games, I feel like they're like probably the company that has singularly influenced my design style and philosophy the most. So even with a game like Art Styles that isn't necessarily a Nintendo style game, when we were developing it, one of like our core design pillars was like, it's Nintendo for adults that read New York Times.
Ooh.
Right, so like we wanted the spirit of Nintendo and the way that they and their design philosophies to provide like a fun, whimsical experience for adults. Like it doesn't have to just be childish games. Sometimes people think of Nintendo games as just games for kids, and I think they are really elegantly designed with a ton of thought. And so yeah, playing those early Nintendo games definitely made me a huge fan. And in being a huge fan, I've studied a lot of Nintendo's design philosophy and find that it aligns with my own personal philosophy. So yeah, it absolutely did.
It's interesting because it works for all ages, basically. Pretty much every game that Nintendo does, it works for all ages. Like you could play Super Smash Brothers as a casual, but if you really get into it, then it can get pretty hardcore. and all the different platforms, they still hold up to this day, even Mario 64 and whatnot, and even I played Super Mario Odyssey just recently, and it was a beautiful little open world, I'd say open world platform. I think it worked really well. So yeah, they still retain that philosophy, and that's really nice, because it has a very nice sense of identity there. But yeah, what about you, Alex? Do you think that those early games that you mentioned are influencing the kind of work that you like to do now?
Yeah, I mean, I think with art styles, by necessity, it's a very small scoped game. Just because, we're one of the things we kind of discovered early on working together is we have pretty high ambitions, but in order to get there, you have to take small steps. And so a lot of, some of the games that we have kind of shelved but ready to take out when the resources are right, are much more really kind of, I would say, sort of like a hybrid of a Nintendo style game, very cute, cozy, with some, puzzle solving elements. So we've been able to, in the work that we've done, not necessarily art styles, but, the bigger plan, we've been able to kind of fuse and take both of our shared interests and kind of build off of those, into the games that we will hopefully one day soon make.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's a step-by-step process, isn't it? Very small steps, but yeah, as you mentioned, to fulfill those ambitions, you have to go there one little step at a time. And I think I've learned that when I did a few game jams as well. Like, yeah, you can get out of the scope pretty quickly. So yeah. Right, and well, of course, this is something that's always interesting for everyone, because at some point there always comes that moment where you stop. Well, not you stop playing games, but you play games so much and you love them so much that you realize, oh, I could be doing one of these. I think it would be fun to try and do one of these. So you switch from just playing games to also making them. When was that for you too? Was there like a light bulb moment that inspired you?
Yes, I didn't start off going to school to learn game development or even anything you would consider adjacent. I didn't actually, as naive as it sounds, I didn't know you could go to school to learn how to make games. I guess I didn't even know who the people who made games were. They just were these things that I bought, and they were amazing, and the making of them was completely unknown to me.
Yeah, then you saw the credits and like, oh, right.
Yeah. No, I was kind of like, from a young age, I was like, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a lawyer, like I had these kind of like very different dreams. And when I started university, I started off studying archaeology. I really have like an interest in history and culture. And being outside, and so archaeology seemed like a really natural fit. And I remember receiving grass, basically. I remember I received a homework assignment in an archaeology class where it was like this 20-page packet, and it contained all of this information from this archaeological dig with diagrams that showed all the different layers of soil and the objects or seeds or whatever was found in every different like strata layer of the soil. And you got kind of like a little bit of local history. So you were basically playing what felt like a mini mystery solving game. Like you were given all of these clues in the forms of diagrams and maps and historical records and journal entries, and you were asked to kind of recreate who lived in this like farmhouse. It was, I believe it was in Europe, and there was supposed to be a Roman villa underneath, and like you were trying to piece together like the history of it, and it felt like a video game. And I was like, this is really cool. This is awesome, and it was really cool. And then I found out, like through more study, that like archaeology isn't really always like that. It is like that, but it's really drawn out, and there's a lot of like, red tape, and for good reason. Like you're doing, historical documentation of stuff. It has to have a different process. But what I found I loved about it was this like puzzle solving element, and I actually liked thinking about and creating the puzzles more than I enjoyed like solving them and writing about them.
I think there's a game idea in there somewhere, I suppose.
Yeah. No, there for sure. I have actually one of the many shelved ideas that we have is an archaeology game, kind of similar because it was like so fun and lends itself really well to like a Myst style. Yeah,
could mix like game. Puzzle elements to like Settlement Builder or something like that. I think it would be a really interesting one. I would definitely play something like that.
I would too. And I think that's, and while I was, I kind of like fell out of love with archaeology because of a lot of different reasons, and switched over to English literature because I was like, well, maybe I can like write these types of things. You know, I'm really good at writing and have good language skills, so maybe I'll pursue that. And while I was pursuing English, I met somebody who was studying video game development at a different university in my state. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that you could study this. Like, I had no clue. And one of the top universities is in my state. How convenient. So the next semester I like transferred to the different university and switched into the video game development program. And like the rest is a pretty obvious story about, you know, I got my bachelor's degree and then my master's degree in game development. And that is where we met.
Yeah, my journey was kind of similar. I started off kind of doing one thing. In my case, it was film, and
cool, yeah.
And I had some success. You know, I was I kind of formed a little studio with my best friend at the time, and we
as a director or like as a screenwriter. What was your focus?
I was kind of doing it all. I was trying to do the indie game dev dream.
Okay.
Yeah. So you know, I wrote the scripts and, you know, and cinematography and directed and ended up composing music and you know, kind of putting my fingers in every little piece of the puzzle as I could, and it was a great time. And as I kind of got further and deeper into that career, I kind of realized, you know, the stress of being on set and running these productions. It was just like, I don't know, it kind of didn't feel healthy. I was running it like a million miles an hour all the time, and at that same time, the game development program at the university was kind of just getting started, and so I was able to kind of switch gears into that, and realize that a lot of the things that I really loved, kind of about world building in film, applied maybe even better to games, because instead of these, you know, linear narrative stories, I was able to craft worlds and engaging interactions between you know, the player and the world, or me as the designer, effectively. So it felt, you know, both like it was kind of more aligned with where my passions were, but it also was this new horizon that I think film, you know, for as many new and amazing things, you know, that come onto Netflix or HBO or whatever, it feels a little bit more explored, that territory. And games felt like this vista of, like, you know, new platforms and technology coming out all the time, and so it was very much, you know, it had that excitement of like you could kind of do everything. And so that's what kind of hooked me. And I was like, okay, well, now I got to learn 3D art and programming and, you know, a game engine well enough to really understand the fundamentals. So that journey then took, I mean, like 14 years of really core, like,
I don't think it ever ends, does it? Yeah.
it kind of doesn't. And I'm grateful for that, because I think, you know, each new, you know, plugin that comes out or development to the engine, like, you know, new things that territory becomes more explorable, and you get to kind of you play with new tools. But it was definitely a journey to get to the point I'm at now, where I'm like, okay, now I kind of do know every little piece of the pipeline. And the last little piece is marketing, which has been our lesson over the last like 6 months. So that's painfully ticking that box as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, sounds like you guys approach the same thing, but from two different angles. But it's always interesting, because you're not the first person who says, oh yeah, the you know, games give me what I love, but more. And I can see why a lot of people say games are just a great medium, because you have you have the emotional power of film, but with the interactive element added to it. And I think that's really powerful. Of course, depending on what you do, but you guys are doing something really interesting, and that is going to be my next question. But I'm curious about one thing first. where did the name Inkblack Interactive come from? And when did you form the company duo?
Oh yeah, in the deepest depths of COVID, we were kind of in lockdown. Like, okay,
let's form a company. This seems like a great time to form a company. And my hair is black. I wear like exclusively black.
Okay.
I probably have for over a decade. It's kind of just like my signature.
Okay.
Look. So I think that kind of influenced it. It's a play off of Inkblot. But like Inkblack Interactive didn't sound very cool. Inkblack Interactive has like a better ring to it. But like the artistic like theming is, ink splatters and stuff like that.
Yeah, and then I've seen those. That's definitely. I think it's part of the logo as well. Like I've seen your logo somewhere. Yeah, but yeah.
It maybe is an interesting choice. Given that our influences are like Nintendo and stuff. We're not making horror games.
No, I think when we created it, we weren't 100% sure indie games were going to be the route we were going to go. We were also looking at perhaps like taking an interesting branch off of game development and doing photogrammetry and 3D scanning objects to build like large libraries of props and assets to use both for like game and film. So we did like kind of get into photogrammetry during COVID, but that also wasn't like the easiest and best time to be like, hey, can we come scan some of your items?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And it also, like, this was before Unreal Engine introduced, is it Nanite, that allows you to work with meshes that have, like, millions of polygons, which 3D scanned objects do. So there were, like, a lot of hiccups that we ran into when we were kind of pursuing perhaps that branch of game development. But when we came up with Inkblack Interactive, it was kind of to, like, cover all of the different pursuits that we have, because sometimes we do things like, we'll experiment with like photogrammetry or, making a film or doing a mural on a building or, like we pursue a lot of different like artistic endeavors. So it covers more than just our games. So it maybe doesn't fit the cutesy aesthetic that is definitely like in my heart, but it matches kind of us as people. So.
But I think it still kind of makes sense because when I think of ink, maybe because I'm a writer and I'm biased, but I think of storytelling and whatnot. So what you guys are doing, the art is basically storytelling in a lot of ways. So I think there's a little bit of a theme there, and I think it fits really well, especially depending on what you're going to do next after art styles. But I don't see it out of place when it comes to the game that you're developing now. Maybe when you look at the art style, yes, but I think thematically we are pretty close. About art styles, and we're about to get into what the game actually is and how it works. But is there a development challenge that left a mark on you during the development of art styles? And when I ask you this, I'm thinking. You mentioned that the goal is to give you a unique and effective way of learning art history through a game. So how did you balance the educational and fun aspects of the game, and was that one of the challenges that you possibly encountered?
I think that's probably the challenge that we encountered. There's like not a ton of games in the space of like education and fun. We were kind of brainstorming and we're like, wow, when was the last educational game you played? I think it was Mavis Beacon Teaches Typing, which is like, many people may be familiar with, which was like both fun and not. So, I love learning and I have a huge passion for it. And I think, at one point I did want to be a teacher. And so education is something that I love both like partaking in from both ends of the spectrum. But I wanted to make like learning something fun. In previous projects that I've worked on, we used video games to treat clinical depression in elderly adults that was resistant to treatment. And so it gave me this idea that like you can use video games to change the brain and to
Do you have
mold
a
the
case
brain.
study for that? Because it's really interesting. I'd love to read about it.
Yeah, you can. The game is called NeuroGrow.
Okay.
And it is published through the University of Utah and the GAPP Lab, GAPPLAB. There's an NPR write-up about it, and also a local Salt Lake City newspaper write-up about it.
Oh, I think I found it. Yes. Neurogrow, there you go.
Neurogrow, yeah. So I worked with Shizuko Morimoto to design this game. She was the clinician that was, working with the patients and testing the game with them one-on-one. And I designed, would tweak the design to get different results. And basically the design was to try and get people to use both sides of their brain at the same time, kind of like juggling, in order to exercise the frontal lobe. And if your frontal lobe is strong and healthy, you are more likely to respond to your depression treatments, whether that be medication or talk therapy or things like that, because your executive function is functioning as it should. So that was the goal with that project. And so I thought to myself, like, well, how can we use games to like teach art history? And the art history piece came in because neither of us are artists. I mean, like, we can be in a pinch, but it's in terms of like a dedicated artist, we don't have one. So art styles kind of came about because of the need to use public domain pieces of art.
Oh, well, that's a very clever spin on public domain art. Yeah, okay.
That was Alex's idea. He came
great
up
idea.
with the hex. Yeah, great. It was a great idea. He came up with like the hex-based tile puzzle solving mechanic, and thought, well, okay, we need some sort of like puzzle image. What can we use that's in the public domain? Pieces of fine art. And then me as the designer, he's like, okay, Emily, how can we get you interested in this? And I'm like, I want it to teach art history, and I want to see if puzzle solving while looking at an image of a famous painting actually helps you understand it or look at it longer or closer, take in more details, or even just remember the piece better than if you were to just see it online or in a textbook.
I think we've all kind of had that experience going to art museums, and you get really excited through the first like 20 paintings you look at, and then it just starts like you just get
then it becomes a blur
of art, and you're like, do you read the plaques? Do you like spend time looking in the details? And we were like, well, it's probably more effective to teach that, or to have a positive experience with a piece of art that oftentimes has like really interesting details about
details
it.
And such. Yeah, absolutely.
You kind of get overwhelmed. So to do it kind of as a daily activity where you pair a little bit of fun puzzle solving that gives you an insight into the details and the sort of structure of the painting until you solve it, and then you get kind of an equivalent number of minutes of text learning about it, the historical production of it, the artist a little bit. Sometimes it's more cultural, to have give people the experience, the sort of optimal experience of an art museum, but in the comfort of their daily routines, I think was kind of our goal.
Yeah, and I think it's a great goal, and also, I mean, the good thing about there are a lot of things that I could complain about when it comes to the Italian educational system, but one of the good things that we do is we do a lot of art history because of the country that we are. So I always like to go in museums and recognize those pieces of art that maybe I've studied when I was a kid or something like that, or the authors that I recognize as a kid. But still, to me, and I like art a lot, still to me, that blur effect happens. So I think I can see the value in blending the two things and making educational and fun work together for something like art styles. And well, I guess now we got to the point where we have to say a little bit more about the game. So would you like to talk a bit about what art styles is, how it works, and basically anything that you can share about it?
Yeah. Art Styles is a daily puzzle game. So think like, your Wordle, where you receive a new puzzle every day that you can play for free. And that puzzle is a piece of fine art from across history and across the globe. And we have a unique puzzle solving mechanic that instead of jigsaw pieces, they are hexagon tiles. And rather than just receiving all of the pieces for the puzzle at once, they actually flip over and reveal themselves as you make progress through the painting. So you're solving it in kind of these little like bite-sized pieces that keep kind of that like excitement curve of solving a jigsaw puzzle like really quick and rapid, when you solve a traditional jigsaw puzzle, you dump all the pieces out and you start sorting the edge
Yeah,
pieces, and it's exciting, and you're getting the border, and then you're just left with the whole blank middle and all of these pieces in it, and like the fun drops to like zero. Until someone will push you through the puzzle. Come on, we got to finish it. And like the fun will ramp back up towards the end. And then by the time you're done with the puzzle, you're so sick of it. It's been on the table for maybe days, weeks, who knows. Like the curve of enjoyment of a puzzle is way too drawn out. It's not fun. But with Arts Tiles, what we decided to do is try to make that curve something that you experience very frequently. And I believe that we've succeeded with this like unveiling mechanic. So after you solve kind of a couple pieces, it will flip over a few more for you, kind of in the direction of the puzzle that it believes that you are solving. So it's kind of guiding you. You are kind of guiding yourself through the puzzle in a way, discovering parts of it, guiding yourself through it, edge to edge. And because the pieces kind of just keep coming and are drip fed to you in a satisfying way, it maintains kind of that like excitement pace throughout solving it. And when you complete the puzzle, you are rewarded with, I guess I think it's a reward. You're rewarded with some information about the painting, which is like, anywhere between like 3 to 5 paragraphs of researched information about, like Al said, the painting, the time frame it's from, its cultural importance, something interesting about the author. I spend a lot of time personally like researching and writing these histories about these paintings and like finding the most. It's a lot of time researching and writing and translating a lot of Italian websites into English because you guys have so much beautiful art. So trying to make like something that's not just even an art history game, but a like world history game. I've learned so much about the history of different countries, about the histories of different cultures and different religions. Our world is recorded by artists. And I think it's such an important thing that people get exposure to. And once you kind of are familiar with like maybe the language that art uses to communicate with you, you can learn some just really amazing, beautiful things about history that come from a segment of our culture that are very emotional and creative. And so it gives us just a very unique lens into what was happening in a time and a place. And with Arts Tiles, we try really hard to find artists from, east to west across the globe, and from, earliest paintings to as modern as we can get and still be in the public domain. Man and woman, so that we can give like a really well-rounded arts education as well. So I think when people see Arts Tiles, it's just like kind of a fun little art puzzle game, but what goes into the back end of creating it is a ton of like love and care and research to provide people with something we think is like a really beneficial thing to learn about.
And sorry, go on.
Just to kind of tie that up a little bit too, that like I think culturally worldwide we're in a period of time where everyone is very focused on the here and now and the sort of minutia, and through the internet and 24/7 news, we are like glued to this reality TV show that we're living in. And for me, reading the research that Emily does on the paintings, it like broadens your perspective, and it's like, okay, like I can see my current time with a little bit more of a removed sort of a little bit more perspective.
That helps. And I'm sure it does.
So I think it's a nice healthy dose of sort of of a higher perspective, in the current culture and time we live in.
That's why I like history. It gives you a chance to just take a step back and look at things from a different perspective and be like, oh wait, this is exactly what's going on now, or something like that. And There's, and I like that you brought up the topic of research, because I think it's not talked about enough, and it's one of the pleasure, at least for a creative person like me and someone who loves knowledge, it's one of the pleasures of working on something creative or on entertainment or something in general, because when you're writing a story, when you're working on something like that, you do have to do a little bit of research, and you end up learning so much stuff, sometimes random stuff. In my case, I read a whole book about the surveillance system in China because I'm writing a dystopian book. So I learned a lot about how that works and the credit system and all of that. And I think it's always interesting, and all of those things that you just learn by creating something. So you really assimilate them, because then and you absorb them, because then you have to put them into practice to do the thing that you're working on. And it's a really, really fascinating part of creating something, when you have to learn about the thing that you're creating. And it's great to hear that that both of you guys are gaining something from that. So yeah, it's really, really interesting there. I think you answered my question about what inspired art styles. I think you were looking for an idea, and the public domain art came up. But I'm curious about how do you select the artworks that are featured in the game? Do you just go?
This is a great question.
Yeah, do you go off like personal taste, or do you?
Somewhat. I have a process.
Okay.
It's involved. It's not that involved. It's a very whimsical process, actually. I like to just browse through tons and tons of paintings and pick out ones that I find interesting. And interesting comes with a caveat. All of the paintings that I select have to work as a jigsaw puzzle. So there are tons of really interesting paintings out there that are landscapes with no sky, like just, mostly sky and no clouds. And like nobody wants to solve a solid blue puzzle. Any of like the Rothko paintings, nobody wants to solve a solid square. Like there's a lot of art that is interesting and fascinating and important to know about, but not a good puzzle. So
not a good puzzle,
it has to be something, that's both interesting and is a good jigsaw puzzle. And those have to be kind of like weighed equally. Because every once in a while I'll include a puzzle that's not a great jigsaw puzzle if it's a really interesting painting, but I gotta really feel that
okay
in my heart that it's really interesting. Otherwise, I do try to I have like kind of just a randomly generated spread of art movements. So like, okay, I need a Rococo painting, now I need an Expressionism, Renaissance, now I need early Chinese, now I need a Korean, like, so I basically just have this list to make sure that I'm hitting all of the different movements and all of the, that's the way that I can like make sure, okay, if I've covered all these movements, I've covered time and space for art history. For the most part, it's a good check. And then I have over 500 artists that I have collected into a big bank and, documented when they lived, what their nationality was, and what their art movement was, so that I can select from that huge bank. I'm trying not to repeat very many artists yet until we kind of get through some of the most well-known artists. Some of the well-known artists have 2 or 3 paintings in art styles already. So, we are trying to, if they're really famous artists with a really huge collection, they're going to have probably more puzzles. Some artists may only have 1, if that's the known contribution. And then we do separate the puzzles into seasons. So we have, spring, summer, fall, and winter.
Okay.
And we do that for theming purposes and also, efficiency on the back end. So that we can like kind of collapse and put away a season when the user is not playing in that season. But then I'm currently selecting puzzles for the winter 2024 season, which includes December, January, and February. So I would like a lot of those puzzles to feel winter-esque. They can be winter landscapes, or maybe the colors are cooler in nature, or perhaps it's a story that takes place in winter, even if it doesn't necessarily look like it. So I am trying to I have a large overarching theme. I have a list of movements I have to hit. I try to include a certain number of women and people of color artists each month.
That's good. Yeah.
The reality is that art history is not
biased,
exactly. It's a little bit biased. Yep, there. So there are less female artists. There are less known paintings. And we are focusing mostly on paintings. That's the other thing. Some cultures have a really rich history of art that is sculpture or pottery or textiles, and those just don't necessarily exist the same online for us to use. Maybe if we went back to photogrammetry and scanned a whole bunch of sculptures and pots, it's something we've toyed about as a pie in the sky future scheme, like we have many of. But yeah, so I curate this list of puzzles. Alex sets them up in the game engine so that it will create the puzzle and display all of the text.
There's a little bit of balance there, some of the interesting sort of cultural paintings from China are very muted colors, often just 2 or 3 colors, and a lot of fine detail, but not a lot of kind of continuous chunks that become easy to solve. And so some puzzles will naturally turn into easier puzzles, just reducing the number of pieces because there isn't the sort of amount of rich visual distinctiveness between the pieces.
So a lot of pieces would look the same, and so it would become difficult to actually place them.
Exactly. And some are just insanely complex and detailed and have other kind of considerations. So
some of the Chinese art, there. Some of the scrolls are over 30 feet long, and so it's okay, how do you, this is a national treasure in China, this is one of their most revered pieces of art, it's 30 feet long. I would love to include it as a puzzle because it is so important and there's much to be learned from it. So we'll just take, if they're extremely long hand scrolls, we'll take little chunks that show a recognizable piece of the landscape or something that we can talk about.
Nice, so,
so I think I'm actually most proud of how we have curated the content. There are a lot of art history apps out there, and there are even puzzle apps, puzzle games that use pieces of fine art. But what sets art styles apart, besides the unique puzzle mechanic, I think, is the depth of information and the care that goes into curating it. I spend, I think we calculated on average between researching and writing 1.5 hours to 2 hours per puzzle. So, and there is a new one every day, plus 10 bonus puzzles for each month in a themed bonus pack. Those are just ones that you can you earn an in-game currency every time you solve a puzzle. You can spend that in-game currency to purchase a monthly bonus pack of 10 puzzles, and those come in a theme. So we have paintings of cats, paintings of dogs, ancient Egyptian artwork, stained glass. So it kind of gives us an opportunity when there's a really interesting niche in art, but maybe there's not enough to keep it in the regular rotation of daily puzzles. We can do a little compact monthly pack and do that.
Yeah, I think you guys have a really, really, really great system there, really comprehensive. I think it covers a lot of things, and it sounds like you're basically building a database of art of puzzles. I would use something like Notion or something like that. But yeah, it's just it sounds really comprehensive. It sounds really interesting too, and I'm sure it's fun to work with as well. Even just a research phase, just having to categorize all of those things, especially if you are organized people, and it does sound like you are. I'm sure there's a lot of fun in that part of the process too. But yeah, so well, I think we're almost at time, I would say, but now it's time for, I think, one of the most important questions that I like to ask to everybody who comes on the show. And I'm curious to hear, well, I think you may have answered some of it already, but I'm curious to hear in a more structured way from both of you. Why are you game developers, guys? What is it that drives you forward?
I think for me, it's a chance to give users, players, an experience that is enveloping of their entire senses. They step into this world, and in a way that that film kind of doesn't do because of the interactivity. I think there's something really important about having that kind of dialogue between a designer and a player, and for them to be the authors of their own journey.
Something really special, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, I think back to moments that have been super impactful for me in games that I've played. Painful decisions in The Witcher or Mass Effect or whatever it is, and those moments have taught me about who I am and like what I would choose to do if I were in the character's shoes in those moments. And so I think games, we view them as often sort of light and trivial entertainment, or the world does. I think they are like a really amazing way to communicate and teach people about things, and also potentially about themselves. And who they are.
Love that answer. Yeah, I think it's really strong.
Stole some of your answer.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I think we wouldn't be doing it together if we didn't have similar motives and reasons for creating. I think for me, when I first got in, like, wanted to be a game developer, it was kind of out of like I wanted to be cool. I want to be a game developer. Like, that was, like, video games were so cool. It's like being a famous movie director. I want to be a game developer. There's a bit of like celebrity around it, I think. Or even in famous artists, they were celebrities in their day. Like, if you can, as a creative, like, make something that everybody likes, that is cool. And that's definitely where I started. And through like a rough and tumble journey through game development, I think I've changed why I'm a game developer as I have changed. That NeuroGrow project that I'd mentioned earlier, I think was like a really pivotal point in my career where I realized, like, I knew games were important. I knew that they were impactful. I knew that they had like given me solace when I needed it. I knew that they had taught me lessons when I needed it. They'd given me all these things. I knew this, but to work, with Western medicine, creating a game hand in hand, and to see it, positively impact 75% of the patients tested is something that like blew my mind. And I'm like, okay, this is an untapped frontier. Like, there is so much available here. But unfortunately, like, there's so much, at least in the United States, like with healthcare being something that is privatized, trying to create something that is like a treatment or could be considered a treatment in the Western medical system is like not, even the university had a difficult time, and this project had been, many years in the making, trying to get it, out into the world. And I don't believe it's yet out there. Still, like, they're working with different insurance companies and whatnot to get it out. So I guess like what changed for me was like I have this passion to make people's lives better using games, and I don't exactly know 100% what that will look like, but in every project that we've worked on and shelved or worked on and put out, we have had some element of like making people's lives better, and that, I think, is why anybody creates, really, is you have something that's important to you that you want to share, a message or a story or an experience, what have you. And I make games now because I know there is a way we can use them to make ourselves and our world a better place. And you kind of need like a pie in the sky dream for doing it if you're going to pursue games as like an indie developer, self-funded, self-published. Like, you kind of need something pie in the sky like that to push you. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really noble, and I like that you said that games can have an impact. And I'm going to look into this NeuroGrow project that you mentioned, because I think it's really interesting. I also know someone who's studying, well, not studying, but she's just starting to become a neuropsychologist. She's going to love something like that. But yeah, no, it's great. Everything that you guys said, like the fact that you have that dialogue with the player, but also the fact that you can change something through that dialogue as well, you can make an impact. I think it's really powerful and something that games have in a very unique way. So yeah, it is really good that you guys brought that up. And if we had to think about it on the flip side, what do you think is something that drives you backwards? Like, what's your biggest struggle as an indie developer?
Capitalism. You know, like
Yep.
there are bills that need to be paid, and like I said, working in America, it's a bit of like a dog eat dog world trying to be an independent game developer, and especially if we're stepping into a place that's like an educational or medical, or like we're trying to take games and push them and push their boundaries into these different very established cultural institutions. So it's not yet very profitable, and I think a lot of those big like government and educational institutions don't yet really feel comfortable or safe stepping, like gamifying anything. So I think this is our way to try and show the world like gamification doesn't mean a loss of value or quality, or that it's not actually educational. And then perhaps it will change the way people in other industries view games, because I think play, which is what it's at the heart of a game, it's the way we learn, it's the way we relate, the way that we figure stuff out. And so the more places we can put play, I think the better. So our biggest challenge is that we are trying to do something that is relatively new, not new, but you don't see very often. Most games are made for profit, and not this game would be made for profit, but not many. I'm like, do you want to buy a Tamagotchi or do you want to buy a textbook? Like
Yeah, no, of course.
Most people are going to choose like, oh, I want to buy a Tamagotchi. I don't want to buy a textbook. So it's trying to change public opinion around what education can look like, not just like people trying to get players, but investors or other large institutions to change, the direction of the nose of their giant ships towards perhaps looking at games more seriously as a tool we can use to better ourselves.
I like that. Yeah. Do you agree, Alex?
Yeah, I think as going back to your question of one of the hardest challenges, I think we're in a pretty interesting and nebulous space where AI is concerned, and how that's kind of coming into our existences. And I kind of view Art Styles as maybe the last project that I will work on, certainly in contract work. I'm being encouraged to sort of incorporate AI tools and things like that. And so Art Styles was a culmination for me of a lot of like systems design and building the code base and the sort of structure. And now I'm looking into the future going like, what are games going to look like in 5 years? And how much do I need to kind of adapt how I'm working and my process to stay relevant, but also to kind of keep up.
So competitive.
And I think on the, it is a scary time, but on the flip side, it's a time of amazing opportunity that we as a 2-person studio can now, if used ethically, can incorporate the AI generation of 2D or 3D assets and fill an entire part of our workflow that's missing. Of course, like if we had money, and going back to capitalism, if we had money, of course we'd like love to pay human artists to produce that work. But now we're in a race with everyone else who's not necessarily going to do that.
And also they're not going to care that much about ethical use of AI, and so basically you'll be falling behind in a lot of places, which is not justifiable by any means. I think if I think about my own use of AI and such, it's just something that I'm still exploring. But yes, there will come hopefully ways to use AI ethically, and not have it be like basically a huge impact on the planet as in terms of sustainability, but also in terms on people themselves too. Since you brought up money, I have one last question for you guys before we wrap up. And this is, if you listen to other episodes, you'll know what this one is. But I kept it as a little surprise because it's always a nice and fun question to ask. So if you had unlimited budget and time, so unlimited resources, what game would you create?
I did think about this. It's a game that we've shelved, which is a game that's like super near and dear to my heart, but would require time and money that that we found we didn't have. We started it in COVID. It's an Alice in Wonderland themed puzzle, 3D puzzle adventure game. Where you are a doll in a dollhouse and you're trying to get out of the dollhouse, not in a creepy way, but you're just, making your way through the dollhouse. And in the end, you do get out. But what makes this game unique is it's like growing and shrinking mechanics. So Alice has two sizes that she can be. So like when you're big, there are elements you can interact with in the room that are also, they're normal human proper sizes. But when you pick up an object, so say I picked up this microphone and I shrunk down to my tiny Alice size, the microphone would also shrink down.
So you can, right.
So it's like an object placement solving puzzle. You have to make some objects big and some small and use them to basically getting over it with Bennett Foddy, kind of like get yourself into the next part of the dollhouse. But what the part that made this game extremely expensive was I was hand making all of the props as miniature pieces of furniture using garbage and recyclables. This was during COVID, like I said, so we weren't leaving the house, and I started making miniature furniture with all of our garbage and recycling. And then we used our photogrammetry equipment to scan it, 3D scan it, and bring it into a game engine. But like I'd mentioned earlier, Unreal hadn't come out with Nanite yet, so there was nothing that could support the amount of polygons, and to take a 3D scanned asset to be something that is game ready took probably 5 or 6 hours per object to decimate the mesh down to something that the engine could handle and also still looked like the object. But I wanted it to be this cool environmental puzzle game with all handmade props, all photo scanned, so it felt and looked like a real dollhouse. And it was really neat when you would shrink down to your tiny Alice self and walk up to this microphone, because it was photo scanned in, the amount of detail you could see was amazing. I made this little tufted footstool, and you could shrink down and you'd be its same size. And because it was photo scanned in, you could see every little fiber of the yarn that I used for the tassels around this footstool. So it was so amazing to get small and look up at stuff really close, and see natural wear and tear on objects that gave it just this really surreal, extremely real, but not, it just gave the feeling of Alice in Wonderland. And that is my dream game. It's still on the shelf. Send me your recycling and turn it into tiny
I love that
furniture.
though. It gives me, even though you said it's not in a creepy way, but it gives me little nightmare vibes where you're very small against a huge environment, but also the opposite. Maybe you can be very big in small environments. Really, really interesting. But do you think you'll ever pick it from the shelf and actually do it? Because it is, I can see some potential in it.
Yeah.
I would love to. I would absolutely love to. But there's a lot of studios that do these photo scanned, handmade, clay or felted, real sets and stop motion animation, and they need budgets that are just astronomical.
Yeah,
and
stop motion
huge teams, and 5 to 7 years in development. They are massive projects. So I would like to do some version of it. We had prototyped basically one encapsulated level that had a few photo scanned assets in it, and that was as far as that went once we hit the roadblock of scanning and filling this place with all these objects. So I would love to get back to it. About a year after we shelved it, Unreal Engine came out with Nanite, and they can now handle these photo scanned assets. But we were on to different projects, and life happens. But that's mine. If I had unlimited budget, I'd make my photo scanned Alice in Wonderland dollhouse mystery escape room.
Well, I'll definitely follow you guys and see if that becomes a reality, because it's definitely something that I would play. But Alex, is it the same? Is your answer the same? Would you like to, or do you have another game idea?
No, I've had, sound jaded, but I've had so many game ideas and followed, so many that I'm just leaving myself open to whatever the next thing is that comes along.
Okay.
I have a love of Sherlock Holmes and mystery puzzle solving, and I have some designs for for systems that do kind of inductive reasoning in in a fun and exploratory way. And I would love to build something in that universe of kind of, turn of the century, late 1800s England. But again, that's a project. That's a team.
That's budget, time.
That's a real thing. So,
of course.
so I'm just sort of letting the whims of fate guide me for now, and then if I get the resources to do something big, then we'll do Alice.
Makes sense.
I usually have enough ideas for the two of us, and
There you go.
and care more than he does. He's like, oh,
Amazing.
can I build something cool? And I'm like, yeah, there's so many cool things to build.
Okay, great. Well then, guys, it's been an amazing hour with you two, and what a nice way to open 2025 too for my listeners. Then to have what a nicer way than to have an hour-long episode with that talks about education, fun, and a lot of all the great things that we talked about, the dialogue with player and whatnot. I think this is a really nice episode. I think it's time for some party words now. So where can other people find you, and if they do, what is the best way to support you?
You should download and check out Arts Tiles. It's available on both the Android and iOS app stores. It is free to play. You can purchase it one-time, lifetime purchase or a subscription if you would like. Otherwise, you can check us out. Arts Tiles has an Instagram. It's at arts.tiles. And we post the daily paintings there.
We're going to start posting more fun things, like
your
top fives
BuzzFeed
and
top
quizzes
5 lists and
stuff
quizzes and things like that.
Taking some of the juiciest, research nuggets that we've gathered and sharing them. So it'll be a fun one to follow. Yeah.
Otherwise, we have a website. It's kind of a work in progress. It seems less important than the constant app development, but inkblackinteractive.com. We have a contact form there if you want to reach out. But thank you so much for having us. It's been awesome.
No problem. Not a problem. And of course, I will put all of these links in the description of the episode so everyone can just find you really easily and just click through. But thank you so much, Alex and Emilee, and the Inkblack Interactive, I suppose, for coming onto the show and for actually putting your hand up, because I really love any kind of project that has to do with like education and whatnot. And I had a feeling that this would be a nice episode, but not just quite as great as it turned out to be. So thank you so much for your time, and wishing you the best of luck with Art Styles and whatever comes next.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
And that's a wrap on the first episode of 2025, Indie Diary number 61 with Inkblack Interactive. Thank you so much, Alex and Emilee. This was a lovely episode, and I have tried out Art Styles actually on my phone since we spoke, and it's such a delightful little game. I'm probably going to buy the full version because it's a nice puzzle game, just perfect for a little phone experience. So, listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show. Check out Art Styles from the link in the description. Support Alex and Emilee because they're an amazing couple and they're doing amazing things. And if you want to support the show in any way, you can go to patreon.com/theindiediarist or check out all of the different ways in which you can support the show in the description of the episode and in the description of the general show as well. You can leave a rating to support, you can follow me on social media, anything that you may want to do, it's going to work for me. So I will appreciate that so much. And of course, as usual, if you're an indie game developer yourself, please get in touch because I would love to tell your story to the world and to help you become one of the next Indie Diaries for this third season of the show. Wow, it's been over 3 years since I founded the show. That's how time flies. Well, I'll speak to you in the next episode of the Indie Diarist.